Cyberpunks, welcome back to another episode of the Cyberpunk Lorecast. This is your host, Tom or Robots, and I am back as usual with the good old Captain of the Sea, Captain Logan, the Captain of the Cyber Sea, and the Real Sea, and the Seas of Cheese. What's up, Captain Logan?
Always like 3 steps further.
That's how it goes.
I'm good with just the Captain of the Seas of Thieves. I'm okay with that. But other than that, I'm doing really good. I was attempting to watch the movie we're going to be talking about just before we started the podcast, and then life happened, and there it is. So
you didn't actually finish it. You didn't finish it.
Well, I've seen it like 5 or 6 times already, but I wanted to get like a fresh viewing, like right before we watched. And I got through probably 80% of it. And I was like, oh man, I wanted to just sit down and just like focus in on that.
Yeah.
And it didn't happen. And I was kind of bummed out because it's such a good movie to just kind of like really focus in on, but we'll talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, I mean, you brought it up. So this episode we are discussing, we've been kind of on a movie binge. We've been talking about the influences on Cyberpunk 2077 when it comes to movies and the genre at large. And Blade Runner was, of course, a big influence on the Cyberpunk genre. And there wasn't just one Blade Runner movie. There was the sequel, which came out a few years back, called Blade Runner 2049. And it was time for us to check that movie out again. I saw it a few years ago after it came out and took a look at it as well. And so we're going to be talking this episode about Blade Runner 2049. Does it hold up? How does it compare to the original? How cyberpunk is it? And how does it relate to Cyberpunk 2077? So we'll be covering that in a little bit. But before we get to that, there has been some new news for Cyberpunk 2077 that we need to cover before we move on to some movie talk. So what do we have this week to talk about in the space of some news for the video game?
So thanks to IGN, Joe Scrabbles put up a report after a announcement during an investors call. We just got the last quarter investment call from CDPR, and they said that both Cyberpunk and Witcher 3 are due out to receive a next-gen console upgrade during the late 2021. Something that CD Projekt reconfirmed during this last financial report. During an H1 2021 earnings live stream, an investor asked the company to be more specific about when those next gen upgrades would arrive, or if they could feasibly be delayed into next year. The senior vice president of business development, Michael Nowakowski, refused to be drawn on the questions, making clear that it was part of CD Projekt's new philosophy, quote unquote. Our target is to release the next-gen version of Cyberpunk 2077 late this year, at the same time keeping in mind that the lessons we have learned during the past year and taking into account the fact that this project still remains in development. We can't say with full certainty that the production schedule will not change, of course. And with The Witcher 3, the situation is slightly different in a way that this is being tackled by the team, by the external team mainly, which is Saber Interactive, the company we have worked with before on the Switch, and also the updates in the past. As with Cyberpunk 2077, our goal is to release that game still in late 2021. However, similarly, the development process is ongoing, and we cannot be absolutely certain that the release schedule will not change. But for the time being, we are definitely aiming with both titles for late 2021, and I don't want to be more specific at the time or at this moment in time. End quote. So.
I know you have some feelings about this. You and I, every time there's a new piece of news, there's something that comes out, you and I kind of chat about it a little bit, and this has been kind of an ongoing thing. You've got some feelings here. I'm gonna give you the stage. How do you feel, Logan?
I want them to be. I want them to underpromise and overdeliver. I understand that they have to hit stockholders' expectations, and that they want to show that there's going to be something big coming from the company in the fourth quarter. That being said, it's a lie. This is a lie. I don't at any point believe that they are going to hit 2021 for their next gen console release. I really, really don't. And I would be better. I feel like I would feel better as a consumer looking to see where Cyberpunk goes if they just said that they are targeting for spring 2022. And that way, if it comes out February 2022, everyone's going to be like, oh, wow, well, that's awesome. I hope they manage to get everything in. And if they don't, then they still have some breather room to say like, hey, we were targeting spring. We're going to need that full time, instead of coming in at the end of November, December and saying, we've been working really hard on this. We're not where we wanted to be, and we're going to have to push it out until spring of 2022. Like, don't get me to that next step where you're just going to tell me that it's already going to be pushed out, because at this point they've delayed this game from launch 4 times from when they initially announced the game. And now they are promising a next gen game. They've been sticking to this coming out in 2021 story. We just barely got 1.3, which was a big update. It brought the game to a really good state, but there are still a lot of things that they need to do. And they were just talking about getting the foundation set so they can start to actually implement some of the big changes that they want to do with some of the big updates. Well, that's great, but I don't feel like these guys really have a strong handle on how to build a game during a pandemic where they're going to be able to manage their time properly. Mm-hmm. And the last thing I want to hear is they're working hard on getting it out next gen versions for 2021, and they're going to have to crunch again, because it's the exact same thing that they ran into a year ago. And they're saying that they're learning from their lessons that they learned in the last year, giving me a bigger buffer between when you say something's going to be coming out and when it is actually going to be coming out is not something they're doing. Like, they said they wanted next gen copies to come out in 2021. We're in September of 2021. We still haven't heard a good idea of how close they are. So just tell me that it'll be 2022 and I won't think about it.
Right. So in my experience, when I was working for a very large startup, and sounds like a contradictory, but it was a startup that had raised millions and millions of dollars and was working on a very large product. When there was conflicting information being messaged out to the public and to shareholders and these kinds of things, it was often because there was very unclear lines delineating who was actually in charge of messaging. So, for example, marketing would say, here's a message. And then sales would then follow up and say, here's a message. And it would go against the thing marketing said, because sales wanted to put forward a message that was more optimistic than what marketing was saying, because they were trying to push forward something that was going to benefit sales. But marketing is the one that was actually pushing forward something that was more realistic, because they were marketing and they needed to hit certain standards. And sales was going, no, we're just going to promise whatever we want because we need to land sales, right? And I'm not saying that this is specifically the situation that's happening here, but this echoes to me a situation where you don't have a clear delineation of who's actually in charge of what message gets put out and how that messaging is managed. You don't have somebody at the top saying, this is the message, we're going to follow through with this, and nothing's going to counteract this, and we're going to stick to this, and this is how it's going to go from this point on.
Well, this feels like the exact opposite, honestly, because I'm sitting here reading this, and this is the senior vice president of business development, not the producer. I want to talk to the game producer. I want to talk to the game director about where they realistically feel these projects are in their lifespan. I don't want to talk to a business guy. I don't want to talk to a mid-level senior vice president. I want to find out from the people who are actually building the game where they're at with this, because they're the ones that have a clearer idea of where the project is at its state. And hearing from the senior vice president of business development, I don't think this guy knows how to code. I don't think he knows how to work in Jira. I don't think he has any idea of where the project stands for their next gen consoles. And if that's the case, he's the last person I'm going to trust to give me a clear answer on where they think this is going to land. And right. He can tell his stockholders whatever they want. But I hate that that is something that gets reported on, because if we hadn't had this investor call, we would still think that it'd be coming out in 2021, but we wouldn't have this reaffirmation that they want to hit that target. That's great that they want to hit that target. I want them to hit that target. I don't think they're going to hit that target. And I don't think they actually think they're going to hit that target.
Right. And so we're getting like mixed messages of like, well, we want to hit this, but we may not hit this, but like, just tell us. Yeah. Just tell us reasonably where you're going to hit. You
right.
know, like what is actually going to happen? What is reasonable here? And so, yeah, anyway, we can dwell on this for a while.
Yeah. I wanted to, I just wanted to let folks who are listening know that you may see some reports out there that they're looking to target 2021 for the next gen versions. Don't take that with any kind of certainty. Take it with a very small grain of salt. Plan on it being out summer 2022, spring earliest, because I genuinely don't think that we're going to see these next gen consoles. Saber Interactive is a different story. I will say that the Saber Interactive company can do ports and they can do next gen things. They actually have a better understanding of how to get that done. So if Saber Interactive is doing the thing for Witcher 3, I do believe that, but I don't know that I would go so far as to think that this is going to be a huge update for next gen consoles for Witcher 3. I think we'll see probably better resolution and better frame rate with a couple options in there. Yeah. But I don't expect it to be like a huge overhaul.
And it's an older game. I mean, it's an older engine. It's been established. A lot of the bugs have already been worked out. I'm sure it's a much smaller project than something like, Cyberpunk 2077, which is clearly still, as they say, in development. So yes. So this is fun. Yeah. This is fun on a similar topic here. There's a chart here, gradually redirecting our development staff to new projects. This came out recently.
Oh, yeah.
And it shows different dates. This is December. This is the end of last year, and shows that, and there aren't specific percentages here, but it shows the percentage of the developers who were working on support for 2077 plus the next gen version. And it was clearly above 50%. And then some of the developers working on Gwent, some of the developers working on Spacco. I don't know what Spacco is. Do you know what Spacco is?
Not offhand.
It looks like a
really strange.
A very small percentage. So the Cyberpunk expansion 1 and then other projects. So this looks to be, I would say, about 60 something % of the developers as of the end of the year were working on Cyberpunk 2077 and next gen version. And then Gwent was another 15%. And then the other 25% ish were these other things, with another 15% ish on the Cyberpunk expansion 1. As of the middle of this year, that changed. This was the end of June. And at the end of June, Cyberpunk 2077 plus next gen version was down to about, I think this looks like roughly 45%. And the percentage of the staff, the developers that were working on the Cyberpunk expansion 1 looks like it had increased by an extra 10 to 15%. So the other percentages on some of the other things seemed very similar. So they've shifted some of the staff over. So hopefully that means that they're, closing up work on this and moving on to the expansions. But again, it's development. You don't know. You don't know until you actually test out the stuff that you've worked on and you make sure that it actually works and everything's good. So we're just going to have to see. But that also flows into the next news that we have, in that, and I think we should give ourselves a pat on the back for this one, because I'm pretty sure we brought this up about 8 months ago, and we even gave some advice, and we said, hey, there's a whole community of modders out there who learn this stuff really well. They're able to mod engines. They are able to create new content, and they do it very well. And it turns out that there was an announcement that CD Projekt Red is now bringing on some of the modding community to actually work on some new content for Cyberpunk 2077. So congratulations to some of the modding community if you guys have been hired out for this, and also to CD Projekt Red for taking some of our advice. That's amazing. Congratulations, because some of these modders out here are extremely talented, and I think that's super exciting with it whenever anyone from the community is getting legitimate jobs because they've shown that they can do the work. And they're creative and they're talented and they're actually getting hired by some of these teams. So I think that's awesome news. So
yeah,
congratulations.
Yeah. It's nice that they're looking to the community to help out with this, because it's clear that they've had enough time with the game and that they've played around in that engine well enough to be able to implement some of the changes, which, if we're looking at a lot of big games, plenty of studios usually outsource to either get assets or cinematics, things like that online. And it's not unheard of for them to pull in modders who are familiar enough with the engine to be able to write fixes for things that can be implemented without completely damaging, the infrastructure or the actual code. So it's just nice to see that CDPR is going to be taking a development company who's run by a couple of the modders called Yigsoft. They are going to be working with them both on CDPR, but as well as a couple other projects as well. So thanks to Jared Moore for grabbing some of the information that I found on that and writing it up for me. But yeah, it's the thing that we wanted, right? It's CDPR doing the thing that we're asking. And it's nice because if anyone was going to help out this game, it was going to be the community, either through giving them our feedback as far as what we'd like to see, or the actual modders getting in there and helping push some of the changes that they know that they want to do, but they've been so busy trying to work on the stability of the game that they haven't had the opportunity to implement some of the features that the community has wanted. Meanwhile, the community has taken upon themselves to actually make these features. So if they've already done it, why not hire them to come in-house and actually do it with the game proper and actually bake it into the actual game?
Absolutely. So yeah, congratulations. And I think that's an awesome idea. The more they hire on people who love Cyberpunk, the world of Cyberpunk, the game, I think in the long run, that really only benefits everybody.
Yeah.
Because that's how you do it. Like, there are people who will do a job because you're paying them to do a job, but the people who will do a job because you're paying them and because they love it are ultimately going to do better work. And in the long run, that's going to benefit everyone. So that's awesome. Yeah. So, okay.
I'm also hoping that the modders will be able to actually step up to, say, like the producers and say, hey, you haven't really been enabling your team to do the thing that they need to do that is going to fix these issues. These are the things that we run into as far as issues with the mods that we've been building. So hopefully they'll be able to take their knowledge and give it to CDPR and say, hey, you need to fix these tools to give your modders more access to the actual files and stuff, the actual creation aspect, or build the tools up so that if they do want to add things like reputations and gangs and garages and shaders for cars, things like that, that the modders will have better tools to be able to do that on their side and just kind of help build up the game with the help of the modders as well.
Yeah, some more insight to that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. All right, cool. Well, let's move on to the middle of the show so we can come back and talk about some movie stuff, because we've got some cool things to talk about with Blade Runner 2049. So here we go. All right, so this is the part of the show where we get to thank our patrons for being awesome, but also, Logan, I think I'm going to start shaking up the Patreon a little bit. It's been a while. It's been kind of the same for a while. I've started an experiment with some of the other Patreons, the Fallout Lorecast and the Elder Scrolls Lorecast, where, you know what, I've decided, just like with the Cyberpunk Lorecast, we've got a bunch of patrons who have been loyal for a long time, and Patreon gives you the ability to add merch to Patreon. So I took some time and it designed some really freaking, what I think are some really freaking awesome looking t-shirts and stickers. So nice. I started with Fallout and Elder Scrolls, and guess what's next on my list? Cyberpunk. I haven't done it yet.
Yeah.
I haven't done it yet. I need to carve out some time this week, maybe next week. I'm going to start working on it. That's going to be on my agenda soon. So the way this works is, if you are a current patron and you are currently in the upgraded section, then you're not going to have to spend any extra money. And so $25 patrons, you're just going to be in the section where you're just going to get t-shirts. All of a sudden, you'll start getting t-shirts. So if you stay subbed at that level, t-shirts will just start showing up. You'll get some awesome looking Cyberpunk Lorecast t-shirts. It's just for being a patron and for being so awesome. So congratulations. Thank you for being here. I'll probably add some extra tiers for things like stickers. Maybe I'll do mugs or something like that. I don't know. They've got a few different options. Who knows? Maybe I could even do like a extra higher tier and do like hoodies. What if I did hoodies? You want a hoodie?
Winter's coming. Yeah.
Winter's coming?
You could totally do some hoodies for winter.
Do like a hoodie. But the designs that I was doing for some of these other Patreons are kind of very minimalist. Like, think of it like symbols. Like I can take like, so I have the, have a shirt on right now. This is the, what's their name? The,
Trauma Team.
I was thinking MedTech, but I'm like, not MedTech. Why am I thinking MedTech? What is that? Trauma Team. So the Trauma Team symbol here, right? But like the Trauma Team symbol on my shirt is all just red, right? But what I did with the other Patreons is I took the symbols, and it's just like the blown up symbol on a shirt, but instead of it being a single color, it's actually a texture in the symbol. So for example, like on Fallout, it's the Brotherhood of Steel symbol, but that symbol is made out of like a really weathered looking steel, like a really high quality weathered steel. And so it looks really cool textured inside the symbol. So it's a really cool looking, like stylized, minimalist, but very cool, high quality looking texture. So I'm thinking about doing something very similar like that with the logo kind of built into the design. So it's the kind of thing that anybody could wear, looks really kind of cool and classy, very cyberpunk still.
Nice.
But maybe I'll do something a little bit more neon, a little bit more cyberpunky kind of thing.
Yeah, I was thinking that it'd be cool if it was done in like neon tubes. I don't know how hard that would be though.
Yeah, I'll have to flex some of my design. I'm not a designer, but I've been I've worked in and around designers for a long time. So I'll have to see what I can do when it comes to like really flexing my design chops to make something like this work. But I'll be messing with it, and stay tuned for a future episode for some updates. And if you have some cool ideas for some stuff or some examples of some things that maybe I could pull some inspiration from, please send them my way. Or some other Patreons or things that you're just like, oh, these guys do some really cool stuff. Maybe you could do something like this. Anything you can send me for inspiration, I will pull from that. And if you have some ideas for even other tiers, because we only have 2 tiers right now. There's the kind of pay what we want tier, and then there's the upgraded tier. So maybe a middle tier between the two, and then maybe like a bigger upgraded tier with some really cool stuff. Like, I don't know if I can do jackets or, even just hoodies or long sleeve shirts or something else. I could even do, because there's like a loyalty thing, I could even do like increasing stuff over time. So the longer you stay as a patron, you get better stuff as it goes on. Like maybe I could do something like that. So there's cool. There's all sorts of cool stuff we could do. So I was thinking, you know what, you guys have been awesome. I should throw some extra stuff in there, and who knows? Figure it out. So anyway, awesome. Thank you to all of our patrons. You guys are awesome. Again, I couldn't do this without you guys. You guys are amazing. So thanks for being here. All right, let's go talk about some Blade Runner. Here we go. Dude, what if I did like Johnny's guitar in like neon?
Ooh, that'd be cool.
That'd be really cool.
You do Johnny's arm if you wanted.
Oh yeah, like Johnny's arm.
Like a just his arm kind of looking at the side, but it's got
like a thumbs up. Thumbs up.
Yeah.
Where he's like flicking you off.
Yeah. Or middle finger too. Johnny's arm just giving you the middle finger. I can see it.
Middle, or just his glasses like crooked on his face. I don't think I could do his face because it's freaking Keanu Reeves. I'd get sued for that. But so anyway, let's talk Blade Runner. Okay, we've been talking movies. There's a few different places we can start with this one. We talked the first Blade Runner. It's an old film. We went into that one. If you didn't listen to that episode, go back and listen. Actually, there were 2 episodes about the original Blade Runner. We kind of did our own thing, and then we came together and we talked about it. Blade Runner 2049. It's interesting. I had a very different experience watching this a second time after having rewatched Blade Runner 1, the first one, than I did the first time I watched it, because it had been so long since I watched the first one. And
I feel like we're kind of missing the big cliffhanger that we had a couple episodes ago, where you pose the question: is Blade Runner 2049 better than Blade Runner?
I did. But here's the other thing: is I also watched it with my wife, who's never seen the first Blade Runner. I asked her if she wanted to see it, and she was like, "No, I'll just watch this one." Sometimes she just like watches a movie because she's being nice, you know.
Yeah.
And she enjoyed it. She thought it was cool. She thought it was good. Okay, by the end of the episode, I think we should answer the question if this is the better movie or not.
Okay.
And it can be definitively the better movie, but it could also be the better movie in certain aspects or not, right? Like we could say like it's a better story, or the acting's better, or the cinematography. Like we can go into specifics if we want to. But here's some things that I noticed, and maybe there's some things that you noticed. Why don't we go into some details here? We don't have to recount the whole plot, because I think, by the way, spoilers, if you haven't seen the movie, spoilers.
Yeah.
Some things that come to mind when watching this movie. One, in a way, it is the inverse of the first film.
Okay.
In that you have a human coming into understanding of what it means to be a human, learning to understand that the I want to call them synths, because that's what they're called in Fallout, but they're
the replicants.
The replicants can be persons, and that they deserve to be treated as if they're people.
What human are you talking about?
Deckard, because he falls in love with one.
Gotcha.
Right? You have a human who is hunting them down. His job is to hunt them down and retire them and kill them. And through the course of the film, comes to learn to basically falls in love with one. And then in the second film, we learn that not only did they fall in love, but they created a child. And then they had to figure out how to keep that child alive. And in the second film, you have a replicant who is designed in a way that's supposed to be superior to the original replicants, in that they're not supposed to be able to malfunction in that way, coming to terms with what it means to be a replicant who is not supposed to be able to malfunction, going against its code. So you have basically a human going against its human code and understanding that a replicant can be a person. And now in this one, you have a replicant going against its code and learning that it can trust a human and go and be more than its programming.
Yeah.
In order to fight for the miracle that the other replicants are fighting for, the OG replicants are fighting for.
And even with with Kay, it's weird because he's lived his whole life up until this point believing that he is exactly what he is. But then he starts to question if it's possible for him to be more.
Right.
And through that, he starts to find a sense of empathy for others. And it's actually appraisal that he gets whenever he goes through different trials as he's working as a Blade Runner, and he comes out at the end of each one completely like nullified to any emotion. You know, he goes through all those baseline tests, and every single time he's constantly like perfect. You know, dependable K, I think was his nickname.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's interesting that he finally gets shaken up by the idea that he could be a born child.
Right. It's the idea. It's the one idea that that the world is broken in a way that he never expected to possibly be. And that also could be him.
Mm-hmm.
Broke him in a way that made him go, that could be me. And therefore anything's possible.
He had to find out.
So he had to find out, which
that compulsion to try and
then all of a sudden he was off the charts. Like he did the test, he was off the charts. He was having emotions. He was capable of being a person. He was like, and he always was. And that's the thing, is that I think he always was. He needed a companion. He had an AI companion, not because he was programmed to seek companionship, was because he was always a person who needed companionship. When the director, the police director, would make the little comments like, "Oh, well, you know, you don't need to worry about that because you don't have a soul anyway."
Yeah.
And he pauses and doesn't respond, and he's got that look in his eyes. It's because
it always felt like resignation to me whenever I see him.
It's because
in that moment.
Yeah, it's because he's going, like, there's a part of him that's processing that, going, or maybe I do, or maybe you don't looked at it like, or maybe you don't either, or maybe that doesn't matter.
See, I never took that perspective from it. For me, it was always the reminder that you're nothing special. And throughout the whole film, he's constantly being told by Joy that he's special. And as he's kind of digging deeper into this case that he's working on, he starts to question if he actually is special. And he's always being told that he's not special. And then he has a small glimmer of hope that he actually could be, only to realize that at the end of the day, he's actually not. But he can still be impactful, even though he's not special.
But isn't that what isn't that way he realized? Like, isn't that the realization in the end, that it's through his actions? It's his actions that make him special, regardless of his origin.
I think by the end of the film, he gets to that point. But I definitely feel like he wanted to feel like at a certain point, he got to a stage where he started to question whether or not he actually was the special child. And he wanted to believe that was something that he was, up until the point where he realized that it wasn't about him. Mm-hmm. And then I think he realized he was so far into the case that he was working that he had to kind of see it through to its end. He had to help Deckard find his child. Because you basically learn that during this time, Deckard and Rachel were on the run. They had a kid.
Right.
They stowed the kid away and hid them very well, so that there was no chance that the child would be found, because they feared what would happen as a result of a replicant being able to reproduce, something that Wallace, who has control over Tyrell's company after bankruptcy, that he's been trying to find a way to reproduce or reproduce replicants, because the amount of replicants that he requires to be able to continue to spread out through the galaxy, through the solar system, has been inefficient, and he can't produce replicants fast enough. But he knows that if he can harness the ability to have replicants reproduce on their own, then he will have become God to him. Right. Which is a whole nother subplot that we haven't even touched on yet.
Right. Yeah. So what do you think Kay's motivation is? You think his motivation by the end of the film is to simply carry through with the case? Do you think it's to stop Wallace? Do you think it's just to kick the freaking girl's butt? Do you think it's to help Deckard? Do you think it's... I think at the start of it, I think that Kay is trying to uncover what's going on with this mystery. And as he does... Right. And it becomes very personal, because he wants to figure out if it's actually him or not. And then once he realizes it's not him,
that's when I feel like he's built the connections, and he's seen what people can do. And it goes back to the very beginning of the film where he's talking to I just blanked on his name. But the guy at the beginning, the replicant that he retires, and that sentence that always echoes through Kay's mind as he's going through the story, where he's constantly talking about it's because you've never witnessed a miracle.
Right.
You're satisfied with your life of being a slave because you've never seen something as beautiful as life. And it's at that point that Kay is starting to question, his validity in this world. Like, does he deserve more? Does he not deserve more? Is he doing exactly what he needs to be? And at a certain point, he realizes that he's so close to a miracle that he's almost compelled to see it out, because at the end of the day, while he may not be the child of Rachel and Deckard, he knows who that child is, and he wants to feel like Deckard has some sort of, Deckard never got to see his child, and he just wants Deckard to have some sort of peace and to reunite them. And it's one of those, that's not fair.
My wife just made me cookies. So you think he cares? So by the end, he cares about them.
I think he cares about the connection that that people have, that intrinsic love. I think there were a couple lines in the last baseline test that he did before he went rogue, that he paused on, and each one of those lines,
the interweaving hands, those.
Yeah. And I think those are integral, because they totally show that if he was being the replicant that he was hired to be, he was following his job, he wasn't getting connected, he wasn't getting attached, he wasn't showing empathy, then he would process those lines and say the keyword at the very end. And at this point, he stumbles on those because he feels something, and it causes pause. Right. And at that point, he's no longer on his baseline for those PTSD tests.
Yep, I agree. I think you're absolutely on it. Like he feels a thing, and he then feels for Deckard. He feels for the child. He shows empathy. He it's at that moment he is genuinely a person. And in that moment, he is willing. Like, it's the reason why in the final conflict, in the final fight, he gets mortally wounded.
Yeah,
and
I would say pretty much guaranteed he's willing to die.
Yeah, well, he's willing to die. He gets mortally wounded, and the scene turns on that moment. She returns to the car to make sure that Deckard is taken in or dies or whatever. And lo and behold, he drags himself through the water, which I'm sure is extremely painful at this point, to make sure that she is dead. And he tries to try to still save Deckard, even though it, like, he very well could have just slumped over in the water right there and just bled out. Like, he forces himself to carry forward in that moment.
Yeah, he realizes the importance. He realizes the importance of what it is to keep the child a secret.
Right.
And I'm curious, how did you feel about Wallace and Love being the creators of the world that they're in, and essentially being the bad guys in this situation? Like, did you like them as villains? Did you like Blade Runner having a villain? Because at least with the initial Blade Runner, it was Deckard doing a job that he was told was the right job to do.
Right.
And realizing halfway through it that it was not cut and dry. It was not black and white, that there's some gray area that you have to explore. And if you don't explore that, then you're just going to be a cold-blooded killer without any respect. And if it's the one thing this movie showed was that replicants like Kay get zero respect from anyone.
Right.
And it's a constant barrage for him.
Wallace, I think Wallace represents the... So one of the... Having conversations with my wife, we went out to dinner tonight. And I showed her we've watched the first 2 episodes together of Altered Carbon. So, which she's now seeing that and Cyberpunk 2049. And it was explained to her, like, one of the common themes in Cyberpunk is that the world has, it's a like a post-apocalyptic world in a sense, but the apocalypse wasn't like bombs going off and destroying everything necessarily. The apocalypse is that the economies of the world have basically turned against humanity, and the corporations and the wealthy have taken over, and everyone else has been just left in the dregs. That's the apocalypse. Like, the majority of the people are left with crap and are living in the slums. And it's the haves who are the ones who are controlling everything. And this movie gives that a face. It gives us Wallace. And Wallace is non-empathetic. There's no empathy there at all.
No, he's a sociopath.
He's a sociopath. And he shows us the extremes of humanity. He shows us humanity without empathy. He is humanity without empathy. He is the opposite of a synthetic human.
Yeah.
He is a human who is no longer human.
He's detached himself so much from what makes humanity that he feels like he's on the verge of transcending to a godlike status.
Exactly.
Like life is his to do what he wants with. He can create Rachel if he wants. He can create everything except for reproduction. It's the one thing that's eluding him. And it's ironic that he's looking to do that with replicants, because that is such an interesting point in a lot of cyberpunk films where AI or replicants, like in the first film, replicants were striving to live beyond their 7 years in Blade Runner.
Right.
And we learned in this film that they've learned from that, and they've opened, they have, what was it? The replicants, the Model 8s, I think, were open-ended lifespans. They could live out their lives however they wanted. And it's so interesting that with like AI, with replicants, it's always about being able to leave something behind, being able to leave a legacy, to reproduce is the human achievement that we've been able to appreciate. And Wallace is so calculating that is the one thing that evades him this whole time. He can do whatever he wants, but he can't force replicants to reproduce naturally, and it drives him nuts.
It's this loop. He is seeking to make replicants more human while he himself is becoming less human.
Yeah. It's
this twist. And that's the thing, is that without a Wallace in this movie, we wouldn't get that. We don't see humans being less and less human while replicants are becoming more and more human. Because that's what this movie is about. Replicants giving birth to children, replicants growing emotions, even the newest models, even K, starting to question, like he is the representation of he is the poster child for does his job, never breaks, he breaks. Like, even the poster child breaks and shows emotion, shows empathy, does the right thing in the end.
Yeah.
Cares.
Do you think it's interesting that the first film focused so much on preservation of life, and it was the Tyrell company who was trying to relegate that, while the replicants were trying to break out of their mold and try and do the thing that would make them considered on par with humans? And now that in 2049, replicants can feel, have emotions, things like that, they're still not viewed as equals. But for whatever reason, Wallace is hell bent on trying to get replicants to reproduce. Do you think that his machinations of godlike desires are just that, or do you think that in that he also wants to have like this business venture that he's trying to get this to happen? Like, I'm trying to think of a good way to word this, but I always think it's interesting that Blade Runner is constantly trying to preserve life and memories and have respect for that with the replicants. But in this case, life is meaningless to to Wallace, and he's just looking to capitalize on the slave labor at this point, while on the opposite end, Deckard is trying to preserve life through Rachel's child by staying away, and he's trying to preserve the innocence that is giving humans or replicants the ability to really kind of just create life and to cherish life. I don't know if I had a question in that.
I think you made a point, but yeah, I don't know if there's a question. I mean, that's interesting.
It's a weird distinction between the two films, that Deckard would start to care about replicants while the rest of the world cared less for the replicants.
Yes. I think I do think that's interesting. I also think that one of the other things I noticed about the film is the use of water. There's a common theme of water throughout the film.
Yeah.
Water, clearly it shows up in the city. It's always raining. It's always misting and raining and foggy and cloudy. In Wallace's compound, pyramid, whatever you want to call it, there's the only natural design element in there is water and light, or our water and light, because there's no natural growth of anything. There's no plants. You can't put potted plants in the building because they don't grow. So there's a contrast between water, light, and geometric shapes in every room. There's water, light, geometric shapes. The water casts natural shapes on the walls through the light reflecting off of it.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, because maybe you're going where I'm going. Go ahead.
Well, I just had a really interesting thought about the room where Wallace interrogates Deckard to try and convince him to divulge more information about how to get replicants to reproduce. That room is clear of everything except for the small portion of a platform that they're sitting and talking on, and they're surrounded by that still water. Water itself is life-giving. You have to have water to have life. But also there's this idea of Wallace walking on something that is effectively what looks like him walking on water. You know, it's kind of a personification of him being Jesus.
Right. I mean, even his facial hair. And there's a lot of Jesus. He's wearing robes at the beginning. There's a lot of, the first time you see him, he's wearing robes. Go ahead.
I was thinking about it too. I didn't think about it until now, but you did bring up the point about the water too. There's a scene right before Kay ventures out to go into. He's like heading out, and he gets attacked by some scavengers out in the wastes, and Love is trying to bombard the area to protect him from getting killed so that he can go out and find this child, because she's trying to get the child back for Wallace.
Right.
But the scene right before that, it shows a bunch of water pouring out of this huge structure. And I didn't think about it until you brought up the water, but that is the turning point of the film where the floodgates open. Literally and figuratively.
Yeah, literally and figuratively. Yeah, water is all throughout this. The climactic scene, the most turbulent scene in the film, the vehicles crash on the shore with the water, the waves cresting over and almost drowning Deckard and Love in the vehicle, and then they fight in the vehicle. The water gives life, but also takes life away.
Also, the tides. It's a changing in the tides.
The end of the film, it's snowing. The final scene is snowing, which is odd, because I'm assuming they're still in the Los Angeles area.
Yes.
It never snows in Los Angeles.
No, I think that the snow represents change as well
change in season.
And also snow tends to get connected to with purity.
Purity, yep, because it's white. Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
So, symbolism aside, I feel like I have to ask: does this do well enough of a story to fall in par with like Blade Runner in this case? Like as a cyberpunk film or compared to Blade Runner, how are we doing?
Well, I guess we're there. We're kind of at the end of this whole discussion. Okay. Was
there anything else you wanted to touch on as far as the joy or like the namings was interesting to me?
Yeah,
as far as like love and joy.
Love and joy. There's some of that. There's the dog. The fact that Decker has a dog. Like the locations are interesting. They take us out into the wastes. All of the children. That whole stuff. All of that going to Las Vegas. There's also, a lot. We see a lot more of the world in this movie than we do in the first Blade Runner film, and the world is very interesting and well thought out, I think.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that.
Do you think Kay's name, like his nickname through the entire
Joe
film, is representative of his affirmation as a replicant? Like everything he has to do is obey humans, so he's a K-man.
Maybe. I mean, his AI partner calls him Joe, right? Like, but she calls everyone Joe. She's programmed to call everyone Joe. That's what her model says. Mm-hmm. She has a quote that says something like, "What are you looking for, Joe?"
Yeah.
But he's the average Joe. He's just a replicant, just like every other Joe out there, right?
Yeah.
Except that he's not, because he breaks the mold and goes and does something else. So there's the irony in that. So there's a lot. This film is dense with stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It goes a lot of places. If there's a sin that this film commits, it's almost too long.
Yes. Okay.
That's it. That's the only fault. And on top of that, and I think this is going to surprise you, Harrison Ford's acting is really good in this.
It is much better. Yeah.
He actually, he's like and maybe it's the director. Maybe he just needs the right director, but like his acting is really good in this. Like his acting is good. All of the characters, the acting is great. What's his face? The lead actor, what's his name?
Ryan Reynolds? No, not Ryan Reynolds. Budget Ryan Reynolds. What's his name?
Oh my God. You said that last time too.
I always go with Budget Ryan Reynolds. Shoot. It's Ryan something.
Gosling. Ryan Gosling.
There we go.
Ryan Gosling. Like his acting is great. I think that he does a really, really good job being like, all of the acting is in his eyes up until like a very specific points in the film where he emotes.
Oh yeah. He's really good with like Blue Valentine is a great movie if you want to see him like act like an actual, like do a good job of acting. But yeah, this one he did a really nice job.
The scenes are very well done. The cinematography is well shot.
Oh man.
The cinematography is great. And from the standpoint of the framing of scenes that, many of the scenes you could take a still and put it up on as a picture in a room, and you'd just be like, that's a beautiful picture. But not just that, but even from the beginning, the first scene where he walks into the farmer's house, and the way the framing of the scene is set up, where he comes in from the very left side of the room and enters into the room to the right, and then it follows the farmer into the room, and you can barely see him sitting on the left side of the room in the dark. Like the framing of some of the scenes and where the characters and just looking at them, like there's certain reasons why you frame a scene and put a character in, say, the corner of the frame, or those kinds of things happen a lot in this movie. It happens a lot in the first Blade Runner too. There's reasons why you skew a camera, or like all of those kinds of things. There's a lot of that going on in this. That stuff works really well. Panning the camera up at the end while he's laying on the stairs implies that he's dying. All of that kind of stuff. All of that's done really, really well. The only sin the film, I think the only sin the film has is that it's just too long. It's a little slow, but the first one was slow, but it's not as slow as the first film.
No, and I think that is the biggest issue that it has, is that it wants you to chew on the scenery. And while that scenery is great, the action belies the length of the film. Like the action in each scene that actually comes out it is still fast, and it still looks and shows really well. If anything, I think I would have cut out some scenes where it's just there's too much setup for some of the things that are going on. Like I could skip forward about 30 seconds in each scene,
right? And
before I got to the next talky bit,
you probably could have trimmed a good 30 minutes out of the film, and it probably would have been better for it.
Yeah, keep it close to 200 or 2 hours, because I think that's about as much time as was needed to tell the story that was there. Everything else was just looking at scenery, which is really cool, if you're making an art film and you want to do that. But if you're going to try and keep people interested in this story of, divulging the truth of a murder case, or trying to have these two cat and mouse chases go on, there's a lot of time where stuff isn't happening, and that's great if you want to build tension, but that tension never always paid off, and it really ought to have.
Yeah, I think it kind of treaded. It didn't quite tread into a tense action film or suspense crime drama. It didn't quite know where it was going between those things and like art chewing the scenery thing. It kind of stayed too far in the middle between all of those things without really choosing which of those things it was committing to. But the first one kind of did that too. So I get why they did it. I think that a modern film probably needs to stick more with one of those out of the three.
Go harder into noir if you're going to do that, and really lean into it.
Right. But but that's a film problem, right? Like that's just they could have done a better job wrapping it up as a film and editing it together as a film. As a story, I think that it's a better story than the first Blade Runner. I think it's a more intricately tied together story. I think it's got better symbolism. I think it's a more interesting question. I think it shows you more of the world. I think some of the characters are actually more interesting. I think the acting is better. I think the acting is way better in regards to some of the characters.
So this all kind of comes with a caveat, though, because it is a sequel. It's building off of the characters and the information that we have from the prior film. If it wasn't, we wouldn't have had that big bit in the beginning that was trying to explain what the first film was about. And what has happened since then. So, going into this, you're kind of going into the understanding that there's already been a story established. And if that story wasn't good, then this wouldn't be able to build so well off of it,
I guess. But I still enjoyed this a lot, not remembering much about the first Blade Runner when I first saw this movie. Because it had been 15 years and I saw the first Blade Runner in college and just didn't remember a whole lot about it.
Yeah. I will say that, okay, so in regards to what you were saying, this film looks better. The acting's better, even though I'm not a fan of Jared Leto.
I think Jared Leto's a total weirdo.
He is a very weird guy.
But you make him act as a weird guy and it works.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. So the acting's really good. Love really does her job well. She does exactly what she's intended to do. There are some ancillary characters that really didn't get fleshed out, but you see that with other things. As far as it being a cyberpunk film, I think this exemplifies like what you would expect out of a cyberpunk film called Blade Runner in the future. So I think they definitely nailed the themes and story there. The story it's an interesting play because it does do a good job of taking a character that you don't know, that everyone can walk through the story with and find out what's going on. And you're learning things as soon as Kay is learning things. And that's important to keep people interested in what's going on. So I think it does a good job story-wise of that. I think where I have trouble is some of the convoluted nature of what the replicants are. We hear stories about how some can live for as long as they want. All of them can, some of them are bound as slaves to go work in places, but you don't hear about them.
Yeah.
Some are street workers that are very self-aware of what they are and what their job is, but they don't have to obey humans because they can obviously work how they want. But some are, deterministic and some do just work for like the police force and have to do what humans say and can't lie. It's weird that they've introduced different rules to the replicants compared to the first film, which, they're going to have to do stuff like that if they want to follow a replicant and have it be interesting, as opposed to, just following a robot going around trying to murder stuff. Mm-hmm. It's a different story if you do that. It'd be like Terminator, but following the Terminator going after everyone. So I still struggle with it being a better film than the original Blade Runner. And that's with the understanding that so much of it is that it lingers, that the acting isn't as good as it could be. But I think that the story of a human recognizing that nothing is black and white and being accepted of replicants in the end, while recognizing that there's a whole different world that is being opened up to him, I think is a better story than trying to track down the child of a replicant and a human and protecting them from being exposed. No, being exploited by a company, even though that does sound very cyberpunk. So I don't know. I'm kind of conflicted.
And his story is it's the coming to awareness of his own humanity. It's a replicant.
That's true.
Learning that he is more than just a replicant. But, the first story is more foundational to humanity. So it makes sense that more people would find that story appealing because it's about humans. The second story is about a replicant.
Yeah.
And we're not replicants. So it makes sense that that's more appealing. So here, we've got to wrap it up. But you want to find something, you want to see something interesting here? So the IMDb ratings for these movies. What do you think the IMDb rating for Blade Runner is out of 10 stars, averaged across 719,000 users? This is for fun. Take a guess. What do you think it is?
I'm going to say 8.6.
You're very close. 8.1.
Okay.
A pretty good score. I mean, that's solid score.
Yeah.
So arithmetic mean of 8.1, median 8. What do you think the average for Blade Runner 2049 is?
I'm going to say 7.6.
8.0.
Oh, really?
They are 0.1 off from each other. Arithmetic mean of 7.9, median 8. They have the same median. They have a mean difference of 0.2. So they're very close. Blade Runner gets more 10s, but I think that's pretty common among movies that are considered classics. People in retrospect are more likely to give things perfect scores.
We have the benefit of watching Blade Runner post director's cut. Like, we've got multiple versions of Blade Runner.
Right.
Do you think if they went back and did a director's cut of Blade Runner 2049, that it would take care of the one main? Because I honestly, I tend to agree with you that outside of the film's length, I think the film does a really, really good job. There's like a couple of storylines where I'm like, that was kind of dull, and I think they could probably cut that out.
Sure.
But do you think a director's cut would make this film way, way better than the original then?
Potentially. Here's something else that's interesting. People who are aged 45 plus give Blade Runner an average of 8.5. So they're well above the average. People who are 45 plus give 2049 an average of 7.7. So they're below the average. People who are aged 18 to 29 give Blade Runner, the first one, an 8.0, but give 2049 an 8.2. So Blade Runner skews significantly higher with age. So I think people who saw the original Blade Runner when it came out skew it higher than the new film.
Do you think that what that is, and I'm not trying to lay ageism in at the feet of what's going on here, but I'm wondering if part of it is the nostalgia of the era that Blade Runner came out, versus the acceptance and CG of the newer one. Like younger generations accept CG better versus older generations appreciating older or the film when it came out.
Well, maybe one thing to note here is that the younger people don't vote the older film lower the same way.
Because that's where I think that the younger generations are viewing it and appreciating it for what it is, but appreciate the aesthetics and the design or the cinematography of the newer one better.
Yeah, the younger people vote both of them very similarly.
Yeah.
They vote the newer one slightly higher. The older people vote the old one significantly higher and the newer one significantly lower. I think this also might be, rose-tinted glasses. This is like, we tend to think the things that we fell in love with in our teens and our 20s tend to only get better with age.
Yeah.
So, IMDb's only been around for the last 20 years. So these people weren't rating this film back in 1982 or, something like that. They were rating this in the last 10 years, most likely. So that might be part of it as well. So it's just interesting to look at stats and try to figure out what does this mean.
I think Blade Runner 2049 has a clearer vision of what it wanted to be. And I think Blade Runner itself was suffering from trying to make a futuristic film without understanding what the trajectory of technology would have had on society.
Yeah. I think they're both good films. I think they're just good films in different ways. I think to sum it up, I think 2049 has a better script. I think it's actually better written. Let me rephrase that. It's a more complex, more interesting script. Blade Runner is more simple and more streamlined.
Oh, see, I disagree. I think that the Deckard going out and being a cop, trying to retire these replicants, and these replicants trying to meet their maker to live longer is a very straightforward storyline. It's very simple.
That's what I'm saying. It's very simple.
Okay.
The original Blade Runner is very simple. The new one is way more complex, but the pieces all tie together very interestingly. Yeah. And I find that more compelling. I would rather watch that. I don't. Me today, I want more complex, more interesting stories than more simple stories. But I can see why that simple story is easier to digest and more memorable.
Well, I see. That's where I feel like the additional storylines in 2049, I think, tend to become more superfluous to the point of the film. I think the point of the film, if you had cut out the desire to have Wallace hunting down this child, I think you could have still had a really good film, because it still would have been a cop going out trying to solve a case. But instead of trying to retire the replicants and the child, you would come to realize the story behind it and then meet up with Deckard and then bring Deckard to there. And then you bring Kay back to the station to talk to Madam, and the line that he says where it's done, that would be the end of the film. And he would have the knowledge of what's happened with Kay and his child. Mm-hmm. He would be lying. So he'd be breaking his programming as a replicant and growing as a person.
Yeah, but you don't get the self-sacrifice for it.
Yeah, I don't think you need the self-sacrifice for it, though. I think that
I think that's the thing that truly makes him human. I think that's the final straw. I think him putting himself at risk, I think was enough. I don't know that he needed to die for him to realize he was a human, because Deckard. I don't know that it wasn't required for him to realize it, but I think it helped us know. It's the thing that we as the audience go, he really cared. He cared enough to give his life to do the right thing. If anyone was the Messiah in the situation, it wasn't Wallace. It was Kay.
Yeah. I just don't know that
he's the one who died for it.
I would have watched it, and if he had survived, I would have been okay with it too.
Yeah, I think that's still a good story. I don't know that that's a bad story. I think you're right. I think you could have done that as well, and then we could have gotten a sequel with him.
Yeah, because it would have been more of like a Wounded Warrior story.
Right. Sure. Absolutely.
Where he is now being hunted by replicants. We're trying to find out like if he was actually lying or not. And then it becomes that it turns it into a giant loop where he was out hunting a replicant who was lying about who they were and what was going on and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then at the end, he becomes that character.
Right. Well, I'm running out of time. I got to do the Mass Effect Lorecast next. So
yeah,
we're going to have to table the conversation. I would love to hear what you guys think about this conversation. I'm sure there are more people who agree with you that the first Mass Effect, oh my God, Blade Runner is the superior movie. I think it just
got real close to turning me though.
I think it just depends on how you view it. You know, like
I agree.
Are you saying it's a better movie? Are you saying it's a better story? Are you like depends on what you're looking for in a film? Like there's a lot of subjectivity in there. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Come join us on the Robots Radio Discord. Let us know your thoughts on that. Shoot us messages over on Twitter. How can they reach you, Logan?
You guys can hit me up on Twitter at CAPT_LOGUN Captain or Capt Logan on Twitter.
And I'm over at robots_radio. And of course, you can send us messages over at Cyberpunk Lore. I believe it's just Cyberpunk Lore on Twitter. I don't know. It's not in front of me right now, but you know, you'll find it. And I gotta go do another show. I'll be back in 10 minutes with the Mass Effect Lorecast. And thank you guys for hanging out with us. And we'll see you very soon. Have a good rest of your week. See you guys later. Bye, everybody. Stay safe in Night City. Thanks for tuning in to the Cyberpunk Lorecast. This show is a part of the Robots Radio Network, smart podcasts for interesting people. If you'd like to help support the show, please tell a friend and leave a 5-star review on iTunes. If you'd like to get in contact, please send an email to cyberpunklorecast@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter at cyberpunklore. Also, join the community on the Robots Radio Discord. The link is in the show notes. The music on the show was written and performed by The Midnight and was used with their permission. Go check them out at themidnightofficial.com. Until next time, stay safe in Night City. We'll talk to you later.
You've been listening to a Robots Radio podcast. Smart shows for interesting people. Check out all the shows at robotsradio.net.